Bob Brinkman and Steve and I and Ben Barr were down at the 10th Circuit. Do you want to say briefly what happened so people can get a quick...
Today we had oral arguments in Free Speech versus Federal Election Commission. Charles, joins as part of Free Speech, our plaintiff in the case, on the idea being that we're suing the federal government, the Federal Election Commission, basically over campaign finance laws that are vague and overbroad, that are getting to the point now where, not in this case, but across the country, we're now seeing Maine, for example, trying to use campaign finance laws to force bloggers to disclose their identities when they're criticizing the government. So we're challenging on the basis of issue advocacy. When you start criticizing the president or federal officials for their positions on issues, you don't have to not just disclose your identity, but you don't have to fill out numerous complex forms every month or every quarter with the government just to engage in free speech. So today we've done a lot of briefing in this case. It's up to about a 600-page record, just to vindicate lines about talking about ranching. But we were before a panel today for oral arguments, lasted about 15 minutes on each side, and honestly, you never want to do predictions based on an oral argument under any circumstances, but I think they went very well. I think there were some very pointed questions asked of the FEC. In particular, why can't they understand their own regulations, which is what happened. We submitted an advisory opinion regarding a series of advertisements that Free Speech wanted to run, and the FEC split on a 3-3 vote on whether or not they constitute express advocacy for a candidate or whether they're issue advocacy. So I think it went very well. Ben Barr did an excellent presentation. Unfortunately, the 10th Circuit doesn't provide have an online trove of arguments, but it did go very well, and I have absolutely no idea when the opinion will come down. Some opinions take up to a year to issue. Hope it'll be sooner than that, but it's we're going to continue that fight and continue different campaign finance cases as well, and and do keep an eye on our Legal Center page on whyliberty.org if you're interested, and follow along this and other cases we'll be working on. So
thank you. My whole thing on this is that the power of the people is the only thing that can preserve freedom, but you have to let the people speak and organize. And these onerous laws make it very hard, expensive, and troublesome for small groups to speak out. So that's what we're fighting for. But that's what we're doing on the judicial side of things. But we've also been working with the legislature, and Charles Curley has read every bill. Actually,
I have not read every single word in every bill, or I'd probably still be at it. But I've read I've either glanced at or looked at, summarized every bill so far.
And before we would read after the session, but Charles has actually kept track during the session and given us heads up, and been selective on getting everything organized. He's done a wonderful job over years, really. We also have some volunteers working in that. And so, Charles, I guess it's up to you to carry the show and tell us what you've been up to.
Okay.
Thank you. You don't need this.
Okay, that's right. I've got this.
This is the fun. This is the mobile mic.
We've got two projects that sound very similar in both in name and what they do. One of them is the Wyoming Liberty Index, and that's now in, I think it's 11th year. That was started 2003 by some people who wanted to move to Wyoming and said, you know, gee, I wonder what this legislature's like. So they started actually reading the bills and then using that to derive a score for the legislators. So that's what Susan just talked about. That's available on the net at wyominglibertyindex.info. We don't have this year's up yet. We are still looking for volunteers, and this is your chance to have some input as to where the legislators are, because we ask you to look at a bill, tell us what you think of it, give it a rating, and then we crunch that through some software that I've written, and we produce a spreadsheet that gives you a score for the legislators. And the nice thing about the spreadsheet is you can go in and play with it. I don't like the rating that these guys gave this bill. I'm going to change it from this to that and see what it does to certain legislators' score. So you can play with it, and it's a nice little interactive tool. So that's WyomingLibertyIndex.info. Help yourselves to it, and I'm always looking for volunteers for that. So people with opinions are welcome.
And inside these, that you can pull out a sheet, it asks for your opinion, and if you'd like to volunteer to help Charles, you can give your name, put your name here, tear it off, and leave it with Mandy. So you have to look inside these to find your sheet. Okay?
So anybody with opinions, and I imagine that covers most of the group in here. The other project, and that's tonight's discussion, is Key Liberty votes. It's a little bit different. I look at 6 votes in the House, 6 votes in the Senate, and sometimes they're the same, sometimes they're different votes. And another thing is they're not always the third reading votes. A lot of legislator surveys are based on third reading votes, and that's all they look at. So Senator Snort fights really hard against a bill, but he knows his constituents like it, so he votes for it on third reading. So everybody thinks he's in favor of it. See? So we make a point of looking at other votes, not third reading. And I did that with one of the votes we'll get into in a minute. The other thing I want to caution you about is that this is not really hard science. It's a snapshot. Just looking at 6 votes out of hundreds, maybe thousands of votes, doesn't tell you a lot, but it's an indicator. It's a snapshot. And I'll give you a very good example of that. On SF 104 in the Senate, the third reading vote came out a certain way, and Senator Barnard voted against it. So on this, he looks good. The next vote in the Senate was the vote to concur with the House, which came afterwards. And on that, he switched his vote. So had I chose that vote instead of the third reading vote, his record wouldn't be quite as good. I'll give you an idea of the possibility. So don't take this as anything really hard and fast. It's an indicator. What I want to talk about is the various bills, why I rated them the way I did. All of this is in your notes, but I'll be glad to take questions afterwards. Probably the most contentious bill in the session was SF 104. Well, scratch the probably, it was. And as you probably know, there's a referendum going on, or a petition drive to get a referendum on the ballot, and that's how mad some people are. There's a tremendous barrier to getting a referendum on the ballot in Wyoming. So you have to be really mad and have a lot of friends who are really mad, and apparently the organizers of that are mad enough. So that's the most contentious bill. As you probably know, it basically guts the Office of Superintendent of Education and moves most of the powers of that office to an appointed director of education. Okay, that one's fairly well known. I'm not going to take a lot of time on it. Probably the second most contentious bill was the fuel tax increase. And my take on this bill is we have a bad economy, people are scrambling, we don't need another tax. There has to be a different way to do this. So I consider it a bad bill. Also, I was not really happy with the way it was pushed through the legislature. SF 104 went through really fast, incredibly fast, but HB 69 went through pretty fast also. The next one, and this is an interesting bill from the point of view of accountability. The bill to close the records on applicants for positions high up in the college system. This came out of a case involving the University of Wyoming. There were candidates for a high office, and some of the newspapers sued to get the candidates' applications. And the court said, yep, they're public record, you can have them. And the administrators at the university didn't like that, so they brought this bill to close off those records. Well, I think this is a vote against liberty. A vote for the bill to close off the record is a vote against liberty in the sense that it's a vote against accountability, public information. I think accountability and public information trump making it easy to do things. And I have my own experience as a hiring manager. I'm not impressed with people closing off the records like this. Hitchhiking. This is a fun bill. I remember in the 1950s and 60s when there was no law against hitchhiking. Common way to get transportation. I occasionally picked up hitchhikers on my way to and from college, got some interesting conversation from fellow students. It was a lot of fun. I never got hurt. Then we had problems with, I don't know, people getting mugged or whatever. States started banning hitchhiking. What it has become, however, is a way, a tool that some police can use to harass somebody who otherwise would be just standing there being harmless. So it became a victimless crime law. So it's a nanny state law. I'm glad to see it go. The fundamental question here is you as a driver or you as a hitchhiker have the right to determine what risks you're willing to take. It's not the legislature's business. So good riddance to some nanny state legislation. Okay, Food Freedom Act. I think most people know what that is. Basically the same issue. You know, do you have the right to engage in drinking raw milk? I mean, come on. How hard is that to figure out? So this is a step in the right direction. It doesn't go as far as I would like to take it, but hey, I'll take it. The next one I want to look at is an amendment to the appropriations bill. Every year, okay, every session, which is 2 years, we have a general session, which we just finished, and a budget session. Supposedly, we're supposed to do the budget during the budget session. Well, more and more, we've gotten into the habit of running a supplemental budget during the general session. So that's what HB1 is, SF1, they're the same bill. And this gets into an amendment. Most of you know Governor Meade asked the state to do a 6% cut. Well, it was a 3% cut per year. But anyway, the Secretary of State's office said, okay, we will lose an attorney's position, we'll end it now. Turns out that the person in that position was a year away from retirement, and this amendment was to bring back that position so that that attorney could retire with a slightly fuller retirement fund. So we're talking about maybe a year's salary plus additional funding. This is not a whole heck of a lot of money in the scale of things, but it's symbolic in the sense that this is the legislature saying, yeah, we really need to cut spending, but we're not serious about it. And that's the problem that I have with this amendment. So and Regina can take a lot of credit for this one. We did not expand Medicaid this year. That's SF 122. You know, we don't need to. I kept hearing during the session, well, we need to expand Medicaid in order to save money. Does this compute? We need to spend more money on something in order to spend less? And the other problem that I have is, okay, the federal government is going to pick up the tab for this. Yeah, right, for how long? Where's our AML money? There are a few other areas where the feds are getting less and less reliable on funding. So I think a vote against expansion of Medicaid is a vote for liberty. And the last one I wanted to look at is the highway speed increase. SF 57. You probably noticed that if you want to keep up with the stream of traffic around you in Wyoming, you're going anywhere from 5 to 10 miles an hour above the speed limit. And I will tell you from personal experience, if you try driving the speed limit on the Douglas Highway south of Gillette at about 5 o'clock in the morning, you will get tailgated probably by a very large pickup truck, and you run the risk of getting rear-ended because those guys want to get to work and they're doing 70 to do it. And they are not going to let a Volkswagen Beetle step in their way. So, yeah, the issue is let's adjust the law to match reality. Now, this is, I said in here, this is a good bill. It's not a great bill because it does give some discretion to the superintendent of the highway department, and he will have an incentive to not do anything because that's the safe thing to do. And, you know, to a bureaucrat, safe means his job, not the highway. His job should be safe. So it's a good bill, but not a great one. The last thing I want to talk about is, as I've already mentioned, by and large, these legislator surveys look at third reading votes. We try to get away from that and look at other votes, but we all look at votes. Well, there's more to a bill than just the votes. There are times when a failure to take a vote is a problem. And that happened with the Citizens and Students Self-Defense Act, HB 105. The House did its usual due diligence. They held hearings. They voted on it, all three votes, etc. They sent it over to the Senate. And the Senate leadership referred it to the House or the Senate Education Committee. Now, I don't know if this was planned or not, but it just so happens that that day they had a whole bunch of people from community colleges, from the university come in. They were working the Senate and the House trying to get their legislation passed, and they, of course, showed up for the hearing on this bill. And for reasons that I don't understand, I won't say educators, administrators of education systems, which I consider a completely different class, tend to be opposed to letting people carry firearms on their schools. This is why they're called victim disarmament zones. So anyway, that was a real good timing on somebody's part. So what happened in the Senate Education Committee is they held their hearing. You need a motion to read a bill out of committee. Now, you can recommend pass, you can recommend amend and pass, or you can recommend do not pass. The Senate Education Committee wouldn't even do that. There was not so much as a motion to bring the bill out of committee. Well, what's wrong with that? Accountability. It would have been nice to have had votes in the Senate on the bill. Vote it up, vote it down, but put yourself on the record what you thought of it. We couldn't get that. The other thing that bothered me about this bill is the legislature is very good at micromanaging education. And a lot of this stuff comes from the education committees. So they're willing to micromanage teachers. They're willing to force them to take all sorts of tests or administer all sorts of tests in the name of accountability. But they will not be accountable to their constituents on this bill. So they get a dishonorable mention. It did not go into the rating because, of course, it's not a vote, and it's only the members of the committee. But I wanted to mention that and bring it to your attention. So that's key liberty votes for 2013. The votes are tallied on the back, who got what, or who voted how, and we've color-coded them. A red vote is, make sure I get this, yeah, a red vote is a vote for liberty, a blue vote is a vote against liberty, so that should make it fairly handy. And it's interesting looking at the results. The best you can do is a 6, and in years past, we've had a lot of 6s. This year, for some reason or other, I came out with 2 6s in the House, and those are Lynn Hutchings and who was the other one? Kendall Croker. Of course, Kendall Croker. Who else? We get some interesting vote numbers elsewhere. By the way, an E, which stands for excused, is taken as a vote against liberty just by default. So David Miller, who normally does very well, came out with a 3, but he had 2 excused on there. The only 0 in the House is Elaine Harvey, but she also had 2 excused in there, so she might possibly have actually come up with a 2, depending on how she would have voted on the 2 excused votes. In the Senate, we have 1 6, and I don't see any 0s. So the 1 6 is Dan Dockstader, who has been very interesting, has been moving in our direction quite noticeably over the last several years. And I put at least some of the credit for that to a former constituent of his, Vern Cox, who did some very good work with Dan over the years. So kudos to those 3. And I think that's all I have to say. If they've got any questions, I'll be glad to take questions. I'm going to ask you to get the mic, then ask your question so that we get it on tape so that our viewers can understand what you said.
Can you speak up a bit more because they can't hear you on the webcast? Can you speak louder? They can't hear you in the webcast.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
I don't know what the timing was on this, but were there any bills introduced that were in response to the federal government cutting off the severance tax revenues to Wyoming? And if not, is it feasible to do that? For example, by passing a bill that might raise the severance, the taxes in such a way that Wyoming would wind up with as much as it would get if they hadn't done that?
I don't recall that anything was introduced. I'm not sure there's anything that we could do at the state level that would be effective.
Well, since I presume a large fraction of the energy that we produce goes out of state, so if the federal government's going to say you're not going to get as much from us, we'll say, okay, then we'll take it from the states that we sell our energy products to.
Or we could simply raise our severance taxes or something like that. That's a possibility. I know that Governor Meade is very much aware of that issue, and he's working with the energy industry and trying to come up with some solution to that. I don't know what's going on there. Gentlemen.
How is bills assigned to committees? Just any committee they want to?
Well, in theory, they're supposed to be assigned to an appropriate committee. And appropriate is in the eyes of the beholder. Okay, one thing that happens is that the Judiciary Committee is supposed to look at almost every bill for legal implications. Other committees look at a bill for other implications. But I'm aware of at least one bill assignment, it was one of the controversial bills, where they made a point of not assigning it to a certain committee because it had too many freshmen on it and we're not sure they're reliable. A footnote on that, our freshman class this year consisted of 17 new people. They are very proud that not one of them is a lawyer. So, and they have been in there to the point where the freshman class is annoying to leadership, and I find that very encouraging. So, yeah, committee assignment is dicey. It's not as hard and fast as it is in the Congress, where you pretty well know where a bill is going to go from the title and the summary. Around here, it could go pretty much anywhere.
John Lucas, the CEO of CRMC, has spoken several times against how the legislature, I mean, he's very disappointed that the legislature voted down against Medicaid expansion. Have you guys tried to talk to him and explain how it was a good thing that the Medicaid expansion was voted down?
I'm gonna get, Regina, would you mind taking that? Regina's our Medicare, healthcare expert.
Susan and I visited with Governor in October and talked about Medicaid expansion. And then I also worked with the House and Senate Labor Committees on the Medicaid expansion issue. People in leadership are very much aware of the fact that with all Medicaid, there are costs. They were very much tuned into the fact that savings, of course, is not realized. You always make a decision based on costs. So while they were trying to say we're going to save this much by putting people in, nobody could show those figures, because truth is they're not realized. There's always a cost, and we would bear that cost. We're adding people, no matter how you look at it. It was additional. There were also arguments saying that if you do not expand Medicaid, we're going to hurt employers. The fact of the matter is that when you do expand Medicaid, you start in a chain reaction where people that are currently in private employer-based coverage will drop that coverage, trying to seek relief from the escalating costs by going into Medicaid or by going into the plans that receive subsidies through the exchange. When those people leave that employer-based coverage pool and jump over to the program pool, the state has to cover all their costs. The employer and all the people left behind in that small lose out in that small risk pool. So it sets that chain reaction where people drop out and drop out and drop out. The costs never decrease. They only escalate for the program. So people are aware of this. You're going to hear out throughout this summer, you're going to hear some more of that messaging from the left. Savings would hurt. Expect it. But when push comes to shove, and this summer when the private insurance companies are going to have to honestly publish their rates, that's when the people will realize how indeed this is going to be implemented.
But I mean, he just keeps telling the employees how bad it is, and people who aren't informed would agree with him that it was bad, even though it was good. So I just
And who is this again? I'm
the
sorry.
CEO of CRMC.
Okay. What's his name? John Lucas? Maybe I should visit with him.
I think you should. He talks in the town hall meetings. I had to sit through one where he demonized the legislatures several times in that town hall, saying what they did was bad and horrible, and how we're going to suffer because of it.
And he talks in town hall meetings publicly.
With employees.
Oh, this is just within your
He's
organization.
also, I think, said it in the paper, and I'm sure it's been stated, and I think it needs to be. He needs to be approached.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for bringing that to our attention.
These bills are all after the fact now, and the only thing we can really do is consider the names that sponsored some of them and give them a nay vote next election. But how many people are going to remember that? But my main question is, what have you heard as far as what's coming up in the session next year? Any under the table dealings and so on and so forth? Or I know there's a lot of them, but have any surfaced yet that you know of?
I assume there will be some under the table shenanigans. It takes a major effort to mount the kind of campaign that they use to push through the fuel tax increase. And having seen the way that worked, I think all of us could be a lot more alert to that possibility. And, you know, if you start to smell a rat, let us know. But we don't see bills. Bill filing typically goes on during the fall, or they'll have LSO draft them or whatever, but we don't see them on the website until late November at the absolute earliest. They don't put it up on the website until the draft of the bill, the legislator has signed off on the bill that, yeah, this is exactly what I want, let's go with it. So the best way to keep an eye out for shenanigans is to go to the interim committee meetings and keep an eye on those. They do publish the schedules. There's also an email list that you can get on. You can get notices for individual committees, as many as you want or as few as you want, and exactly what kinds of notices you want. They will send you draft bills that the committees are considering. So that's a really good way to keep an eye on it, and some of our worst bills do come out of committees. And one of the things I don't like about our committee system is you'll see a bill sponsored by a committee. I don't like that. I want to see a legislator's name on it. This is called immaculate conception. So, but that, you know, keep an eye on those. We are attending meetings all the time. I know, for example, TRW, which is Tourism, Recreation, Wildlife, they're meeting right now in Guernsey, and they have a pretty full schedule. They do meet all over the state, so I don't know where you live, but you probably find one near you.
Maybe you could say something about the upcoming tourism.
So yes, as Charles mentioned, the Tourism Committee is meeting right now. They were tourism, travel, recreation, wildlife, and all the rest of these other things that don't really come under the fundamental role of government. I'll be up there tomorrow to listen to the Game and Fish Committee do their special pleading for more money. I'll also be able to give some more information to legislators about why they don't or should not be funding subsidies for advertising for the tourism industry. We've gotten to a little bit of a back and forth with a lobbyist from the Wyoming Tourism Association, anyway, in the Casper Star Tribune. As a result of my article, he wrote an article saying, "Oh no, look, you know, if you cut tourism spending, tourism marketing spending, that means, oh no, you know, we're going to lose so much tourism revenue." Well, the reality is that yes, advertising works. That's why people do it. And if the tourism industry is not willing to advertise itself, there's no way that the taxpayers should be doing that. Because think about it, we spend about $30 million a year funding the tourism department, and about the state was looking for maybe $40 million to give to YDOT to make roads. And what do we get instead of no tourism department? We got a hike in the gas tax. So these are the things that we need to be thinking about. There's a whole big picture out there. Should we be giving more and more and more money to these departments that don't really provide a service? I mean, the Game and Fish Department doesn't build roads. The Tourism Department doesn't build roads. And yet road building is, for a lot of people, a fundamental role of government. So this is one of the things I'll be talking about tomorrow at the Tourism, Travel, Wildlife, etc. committee meeting. And it's something that anyone can go and do. You can go, you can listen to those, you can go to the meeting, listen, and then if you have something that you want to say, you can speak at the end, and I would encourage everyone to do that. Because it's only if we're up there doing that that we can make sure that message of liberty gets out there.
This is the year of the budget, and we've been doing a lot of work preparing for the budget session for 2014. Amy Edmonds and I are meeting with the governor next week, giving him a heads up that yes, we are going to the agencies. We're going to inquire into their budgets. We've been looking at the Wyoming economy, which is really very poor. The rest of the nation is recovering from the recession, but our private sector is not. We are overburdened with the largest government per citizen of any state in the union, and furthermore, as you brought up, we're not getting the return from the severance tax that we had hoped. That is really there's not much you can do about that. That's in the control of Congress, and we're really the state that depends on it more than any other state. So this next session is going to be a lot of effort to try to give the legislators specific facts about the need for shrinking government, and also good information about how we could best do it. In other words, you can't just say across the board cut. You have to say, well, this is not necessary, this is not necessary, this is not necessary. And really, we need to turn up the heat as far as public opinion. So that's what we're looking for in the next session. Is there anything else other staff has? Oh, go ahead.
I was just hoping to make an announcement and have you folks put it out to all your friends. In 2 weeks, on Monday night, on the 20th, we're going to have Cindy Hill over at the library in the Cottonwood Room at 6:30, so she can give you her side of the Hill bill, SF 104, have a direct dialogue between you and her and anyone else she has at the table with us over at the library. And I did this about 2 months ago because of what the paper put out, because of what I heard on the radio with Dave and you and Dave this morning and things like this. And when somebody says accountability, but they use education and District 1 and all this other kind of stuff in the same breath, you can tell right then that there's nothing set or there's nothing in stone about that, because they could take accountability totally out of the dictionary that they're using, because there is none. Especially here in the district, in the state, when the superintendent of public instruction, elected by the people of Wyoming, has been cut off in midterm. Where is accountability at all when it comes to education? You get into wyoeducation.com and you look under programs, and there's over 300 programs in one district, in District 1, for the teachers and everybody else in the district to contend with. When are they going to have time to do any teaching, or does it even concern the kids anymore? So this is why I asked Cindy if she would be there. She said she would be happy to. And if you could put out, to at least 10 or 15 friends, call them, tell them we're going to have an open dialogue back and forth for her to bring us up to date to that time on what's happened with the court and how she's feeling and what she's doing and what she thinks happened. So if you want to get it from her mouth, then the 20th at 6:30 at the library in the Cottonwood Room, please.
Which library?
County Library.
County Library, thanks. There are at least 2 in Cheyenne that I know, 3 that I know of. So, any questions?
What do you think NG's bill is going to do? Are there enough large sellers, internet sellers in Wyoming to affect that? I know Sarah Trading Post here in Cheyenne, but how about others throughout the state? Are you aware of that?
I hope, well, with any luck, I hope the effect will be nil, because I hope it'll fail in the House. But if it gets passed, what's going to happen is that a lot of small traders, people doing under $1 million in business, won't have to collect it. So what this is going to do is give them an incentive to not go above $1 million. Oh, what a really good way to encourage entrepreneurism. The next Bill Gates isn't going to go there because he can't afford to do the sales tax collection. Thanks, Mike. Another thing we're going to see is, okay, large companies like Amazon, you'd think they'd be against it. Amazon supporting this thing. Here's why. Right now, you order something from Amazon, it gets shipped in from Seattle, Texas. Well, no, they're not in Texas for tax reasons. So that way, they don't have a nexus. The Supreme Court decision a few years ago said basically to collect sales tax on an interstate purchase, you have to have a nexus with that state. So you have to have a business office, you have to have a warehouse, you have to have some kind of physical presence in the state, people there working for you. Well, Amazon out in Washington, they don't have a nexus here in Wyoming. They don't have a nexus in Colorado, so they don't charge sales tax in Colorado. I don't quote me on Colorado, I'm not sure, I'm just making that up as an example. But here's what happens if NZ's bill goes through. All of a sudden, Amazon has to collect sales tax in every state anyway. So what do? They start putting a lot more warehouses around the country. They start doing a lot of distribution from all those little warehouses, or they do what retailers like bed and breakfast do, and that is they sell out of a store, and if they don't have it in stock, they'll order it for you, or you can order it online and you can go down to the store and collect it, which Best Buy will do, for example, for you. So Amazon all of a sudden has warehouses all over the country. They have same-day delivery. They're not paying UPS. They're not paying FedEx. They've got their own vans doing delivery, and it's much faster. You see why Amazon wants this?
If you want to rant on internet sales tax, why don't you give the mic to Bruce?
Well, I think Charles hit all the
He hit all the main points.
He did quite well.
Thank you.
Well,
So, somebody asked earlier about committee assignments, and while we were talking about TRW, I came up with remembered a good example from this session. Somebody brought a bill to increase the fees that you pay for hunting licenses. So appropriately, it went to TRW. They brought another bill to do the same thing. Okay, they rearranged some of the furniture, but it was another bill to increase. Sent it to TRW. They brought a third bill. Sent it to TRW. What do you think happened? They finally got smart. Leadership sent it, I think, to appropriations.
No. They sent it to the committee that can say no to no, that loves any tax.
Oh,
Revenue.
revenue, yeah. Never saw a tax they didn't love.
exactly
Thank
right.
you, yeah. So they, surprise, went out to the floor of the House,
Killed.
failed. But that's an example of committee assignments in order to get the result you wanted.
well, meanwhile, of course, Maureen was writing a lot about this, and I think that really was one of the factors for not increasing the hunting fees.
Yeah, we kept the pressure on, and we had our intern, Colin Thompson, also.
Yeah, okay. Anybody else? Okay, you have something else to say? Here we go.
I don't know if this is a timely thing to say or not, but I'll just throw it out there. Don't we have a gun manufacturer or gun accessories manufacturer relocating from Fort Collins to Laramie?
Yep.
And so I'm just throwing out the possibility of how do we, A, make an example out of said manufacturer for how government is onerous in chasing them out of one area, and how it is, when the laws are favorable, it encourages them to relocate to that favorable. You see what I'm saying? Maybe we could, I don't think I'd be the right guy, but somebody could write something or say something about.
You can do it. You can go ahead. Hey, if you have a product from a company, but the name of the company is Hilux, I think?
High-vis, that's right.
High-vis, thank you. Yeah. But say you're a high-vis customer, you can write to them and say, dear sirs, I have 2 of your sites on my 1911s. I love them.
So
I'd
a
appreciate.
testimonial.
They will listen to that a lot more than they'll listen to the Wyoming Business Council, believe me.
But I mean, just get that out in the public and get the public thinking about the free market. That's my point, basically. Okay. Thanks.
This is a quiet crowd. I guess we don't have enough legislators here. That's why it's so quiet.
Okay. Well, do you want me to?
Did you have a question? Sorry, Susan.
That's okay. I just wanted to illustrate my ignorance even more, the committees that we keep talking about sort of sounds like the Politburo over in a country that we heard about for 46 or for close to 80 years. And I'm just curious to learn how these committees are appointed. Good old boy Hank Cole says, you, and you're on this committee or on this committee. Is that how it works?
Officially, it comes from the leadership. It comes from the speaker or the president, depending on the House. But there's a lot of horse trading back and forth. There are shenanigans. You know, I want so-and-so on this committee because I know he'll vote the right way. Ideally, they try to get knowledgeable people who actually know something about the subject at hand. Of course, that can be dangerous, and I'm thinking of Elaine Harvey as a case in point. You know, she's chairman of the House Labor, Health, etc. Committee, and has never seen a government health care expansion bill she didn't like. So, in theory, it's supposed to be impartial and to try to get expertise. And very often you do get expertise, like in the House of Lords or the House of Commons. You have the same committee assignment pretty much through your entire career, so you acquire expertise as you go along. Wyoming, we tend to shift them around a lot more than the House of Commons does, or the U.S. House. But you know, it's an ancient system. It was used in Parliament long before we split out. And it's a trust system. You trust the people on a given committee to give you a report that you can use deciding your own vote. And I think that's a good idea. It works well when it works, but boy, take it with a grain of salt. You know, like anything else legislative, you got to keep an eye on people's private agendas.
Seniority is concerned there too, isn't it?
Seniority is a little bit of it. We don't do seniority anywhere near as much as, say, the House of Commons. It's solidly seniority there. But the longer you've been in, the more likely you are to get the committee you want. So seniority helps, but it's not a sure thing.
On the gas tax, I found it interesting that it took an hour and a half for an economist to convince the House to vote for that, telling them that it was such a wonderful bill. But in my mind, on the gas tax, all it ended up being is unemployment insurance for the big highway contractors here in the state of Wyoming.
And unemployment for somebody in the distribution chain. Yeah, but that's a really good point. I have to say that the people lobbying for it, the trade association, I forget the name right now, they put on some beautiful filet mignon at that dinner. They're not broke. But yeah, very good point. We'll go all night.
Well, actually, we go till 7.
Well, just one other question as far as the committee structure goes. How could the committee structure be reformed, hold their toes to the fire, so to speak, whatever? Anything we can do from the grassroots level up, or is that set in coal here in this state?
It's pretty well set in stone for now. My take on it is you'd have to change the leadership, the current leadership. Okay, we've seen this in so many other things for popular rule in Wyoming. Yeah, we have referendum. Sure we do. You got to get a huge number of votes, and you've got to get that a huge number of signatures, and you have to get them in 2/3 of the counties. You've got to do a lot of work to do a referendum. So yeah, we have referendum, but it's difficult to do. Same thing with changing the committee system. It would be very difficult to do. Susan?
Actually, there are some specialists who recommend changing the the referendum system and the petition system in Wyoming. So we are looking into that. I was talking with Bob Brinkman today. But another thing, when we first started Wyoming Liberty Group, there was never a voice of freedom on any of the interim committee meetings. They hadn't heard any citizen participation. They hadn't heard anyone taking the point of view of the effect on people of the things that they were doing. They basically would listen to the government testimony in every case. So we have been much more effective just by attending the interim committee meetings. Regina has been very persistently attending the Labor Health Committee meetings. We have people at the Education Accountability, on Education Accountability. We have you going to the talk to the tourism people. So we do now identify key committees, and we deploy our staff with their viewpoint to present that. We feel we've been very effective in affecting policy in that way. Also, it's quite novel for somebody, just a plain citizen, to show up at these interim committee meetings, and they're surprised, and it's a very good thing to do if you can manage the time and your schedule.
I'll give you an idea of the worst. My introduction to state politics in Connecticut many years ago when I was a student, they were having a hearing on the budget, and they were going to go until everybody had been heard. So they started, I think, at noon, and they went until sometime in the afternoon the next day, and everybody was heard. There were 3 people who showed up to speak in favor of cutting taxes and reducing the budget. Myself, a friend of mine, and the paid director of the State Taxpayers Association. Every other person was there to plead for some special interest. Oh, we need more money for this program. And this,
Like the gas tax meeting?
yeah. And speaker after speaker after speaker, the state employees union hired, if I remember correctly, 9 buses to bring people in from all over Connecticut to do this. Okay? I've never seen anything like that in Wyoming. Thank God. But that's the worst of it.
We don't have enough people for 9 buses.
No, the way they're going, we will have enough state employees to fill up 9 buses. We have the highest ratio of state or government employees to private employees of any state in the union, and we are larger by, I think, 1/3 than the number 2 state. It's really an embarrassment for an allegedly Republican government state.
So UW just shed 54 jobs? Was that legit or
Through attrition.
through attrition?
Yeah, so I mean that's a typical way for a government to cut jobs. You don't actually fire anybody. You wait till the person in this particular job retires.
Oh, and then you don't replace
And
them?
then you don't replace them.
Okay.
So you find a job with a 22-year-old in it, and you say, we're going to get rid of this position by attrition.
Okay.
On the bill where the citizen self-defense, I don't see anything about education. Is this a bill? It's a bill, just a general bill, isn't it?
No, it was to allow people to carry firearms in more areas, specifically including campuses, college campuses. I forget whether it included schools or not.
Okay.
So it was somewhat, well, okay. I won't say it was completely inappropriate to the Education Committee. I forget who heard that in the House. I think we're running out of questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Charles. I draw your attention again to this. If you bother filling it out and ripping it off, it gives us a chance to blog on how satisfied people are with their senators and representatives. We're also going to be attending this Saturday's Tea Party meeting in Riverton in the Riverton Fairgrounds, or yes, Riverton Fairgrounds. Quite a few people will be there. We have a lot of kind of exciting initiatives. We hope to bring in another economist to work with, so we'll have 3 people looking at government finances. We are hoping to bring in, we were saying, Al Simpson and I were having discussion also to bring in somebody who's specializing in land rights, property rights, and concentrating on that, because we've been very stretched in that direction. We've started an initiative on juvenile justice. We're finding that Wyoming, next to Wisconsin, we arrest more of our youth than any other state in the union. And we incarcerate a great many of our youth. We, for instance, compared to Ohio, which has a much higher population than Wyoming, they incarcerated something like 700 kids. We had 2,200 kids incarcerated. That means you're not free to go. So so we're beginning to work in some of those other areas besides the more common ones you found. So we're definitely excited about what our plans are for this coming year. For the summer, we're going to have some movies. 3 second Thursdays, if you'd like to join us for a freedom-oriented film. And Bruce Walker, where's Bruce? You want to say a minute something about that, Bruce? Bruce is a musicologist and a student of pop culture.
And literature and adolescent daughters and yes, Susan came up with a great idea for the summer to have me introduce a series of films. So the first film that we're going to do is based on a short story by Kurt Vonnegut called Harrison Bergeron, and it has great libertarian themes in that it talks about what happens when government gets involved in the business of guaranteeing outcomes when government obviously can't guarantee inputs to how individuals are formed. So in this particular short story, and the movie that it is based on, 2082, is those people who have inordinate abilities are handicapped by a government agency, so that if you're strong, you are given weights so that you can't jump higher than anybody else. If you are physically attractive, you have to wear a mask because you don't want people who are less attractive to feel poorly. And so you're trying to guarantee equality, and when government gets involved in that, we all know that only negatives can come from it. So that's going to be our first movie. It's undetermined yet as to what the second 2 movies are going to be. We're going to try and keep them short. We're going to try to keep it a little bit fun, have some good conversation about it. I'm a former English professor, so if you want to talk about subtext and postmodernism and different type of critical theories, I could do that. I'd rather not, but we could have a lot of fun with it. So I'm really looking forward to it, and I hope a lot of you show up. Thanks.
And we do have the little information sheet about that there in your package, so you can, just a little reminder.
Is it going to be here?
Yes.
Yeah, it'll be here, and we're going to have air conditioning. I hope. Chad's been on it. Chad says he's finally figured out a way to keep this room cool in the summer. So, but we won't have any more of these Liberty Forums until September. Okay? Well, thank you very much for coming. It was a very intelligent session. It was a good conversation. Thank you very much for participating.